So, welcome to this first in a little series of podcasts on The World Needs More Poetry. And to kick us off, I am delighted to welcome Stella Kanu, who is the Chief Executive of Shakespeare's Globe. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
It's wonderful to have you here to help us initiate this exciting little series of podcasts on something that I think is very dear to both our hearts, is poetry. Before we begin, just tell us, what's your job? It sounds very glamorous.
I don't know if I see the glamour every day. It appears a big word for essentially what is a lot of oversight over income, people, theatres, spaces, and a big vision to make sure that Shakespeare stays relevant today through imaginative storytelling, live performance, and a real commitment to understanding how there is relevance today in all that he said through his plays, the subjects that they bring, and how that helps us to have conversations that are relevant for today and today's audience.
And living virtually next door, I see them lining up every day of all ages. It's a wonderful thing to see. Are you a poetry sort of person?
I am, actually. There was a moment in time where I would have identified as a poet, partly because I was one of the first cohorts on the UK's first BA in writing.
Oh.
And I studied poetry avidly, but I'd actually already been involved in lyric writing and writing poetry as a teenager. So something really close to my heart. I love the kind of mini container that poetry is, both of words, sound, rhythm and ideas. It's the perfect package of what I think is the divine, actually. Yeah, I really, I always from a young age was fascinated by poetry and what it could convey. And it came really easy to me to write poetry. And of course, the things that come easy to you as a teenager are the things that you don't do. And you go and find really complicated things to do. So I found my way back to poetry over time. I'm really fascinated by poetry. I love all sorts of poetry.
I was saying the other day that when people talk about books they like, they often say it's unputdownable. And I say, yeah, but a good poetry book is very putdownable because you have to keep stopping and go, wow, I need to catch up with that, or that's taking me places.
Mostly it's one sitting, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So which poem have you chosen for us?
So today I've chosen A Portable Paradise by Roger Robinson.
Wonderful. And if you read it to us, and then let's see what we've got to say about it.
A Portable Paradise. And if I speak of paradise, then I'm speaking of my grandmother, who told me to carry it always on my person, concealed, so no one else would know but me. That way they can't steal it, she'd say. And if life puts you under pressure, trace its ridges in your pocket, smell its piney scent on your handkerchief, hum its anthem under your breath. And if your stresses are sustained and daily, get yourself to an empty room, be it hotel, hostel or hovel. Find a lamp and empty your paradise onto a desk, your white sands, green hills and fresh fish. Shine the light on it like the fresh hope of morning and keep staring at it till you sleep. Beautiful.
Very beautiful. So, why that poem?
I guess there's something in this poem that is a refreshed look at what it might mean to engage in a spiritual pursuit in the everyday. In some ways, it reminds me of what we associate with prayer, something that you can carry around with you all the time. The idea of paradise being distant or for another time, for when we pass over, is what a majority of the world has been taught to think about. The idea that it can be present, that it can be personal, that it can be now, I think is really beautiful for the 21st century in terms of thinking about how we relate to our spiritual growth and to those things that aren't earthly, the material world, that aren't the material world. I love it for its fresh take on what we feel is a fixed anchor in terms of our relationship with, again, the divine. And it's a lovely way of ensuring that everybody can get a sense of the portableness of it.
And very sensory, isn't it? You know, we often think of paradise as some sort of airy place.
A picture.
And here it's got a piney scent and it's got ridges. And you get this sense that it's something that you're treasuring. There's that word concealed, isn't there? Which is an interesting word. If I speak of paradise, and I'm speaking of my grandmother who told me to carry it always on my person, concealed, so no one else would know but me.
It's interesting, isn't it? And I like that in a way, that it's something that you can call upon when maybe there are situations and circumstances that make you feel like you want to reach for something. I hear the concealedness in that way, something that you can touch when a circumstance might be happening that you where you feel you need a touch of paradise, and it doesn't have to be a shared experience. I really love that. I really love that as an idea, but I don't think the concealed is in a way about anything other than the personableness of it.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. In my pocket, like you might carry a crystal, or you might carry a boiled sweet, or you might have a stress ball in your pocket. That the idea that paradise can be the same thing, in your pocket, to you, concealed as and when you need it.
I mean, my ears perked up straight away because, and if I speak of paradise, then I'm speaking of my grandmother. Well, I was brought up by my grandmother.
Okay.
And she's recently died, so she's sort of very much in my mind still at the moment. I think about her a lot. And grandmothers, of course, and here's one in this poem, are wise quite often. And they're crossing, you know, the sort of divide of parents with a deeper wisdom. And she certainly was that for me. And here is this poet, or the narrator, being told by his grandmother. And because of that, I think it feels like wisdom you want to hold on to.
And what I've just noticed, just based on what you've said, is that she's handing it over.
Yes.
She's handing over this idea. There's almost like a baton passing, isn't there?
Yeah.
If I speak of it, then I'm speaking of what she told me,
Yes.
what she reminded me, what she shared with me.
Yes.
I really like that.
And that way they can't steal it. I wonder who they are.
Oh, there's 100 different ways, aren't there?
Yeah.
It's an interesting one. It could be just anyone, so that it's, again, doubling down on that personableness. But who steals paradise? Or what steals paradise? What's it embodied in? That's a whole myriad of things, potentially, isn't it?
Of course, one answer to that question is human beings steal paradise from each other. And when I read it first time, in fact, I remember hearing this because I was at the T.S. Eliot Prize when his book, in which this poem is the poem that gives the collection its title, when it won the T.S. Eliot Prize, and I remember hearing this poem. But I get a very strong sense from it of there is some menace in it from the outside. You know, they can't steal it, she said, and if life puts you under pressure. And I think it's because quite often our paradises, whether that's what we treasure or the parts of us that we know are authentic, are at risk. And my goodness, for a lot of people, that's very true at the moment.
Every day.
Every day. And if your stresses are sustained and daily.
I love that.
Yes.
That's the line that really jumps out at me.
Yes.
And that's why I liken it to your stress ball or your something that you've got in your pocket that you can just touch and it takes you to a different place. But that thing that's, you know, life is a series of opportunities to think about something else that might be grounding, that might be inspirational or life-giving in another way, that might keep you connected with your senses. We're constantly looking for that. At the moment, we call that self-care.
Yes.
We try and find all of these ways, but I really love that line. That line is the line for me. I mean, that line could be in a report as well as a line of poetry, I guess.
Get yourself to an empty room, because I always think we know who we are or what we aren't when we're alone in an empty room, in a sort of Samuel Beckett type sort of way.
Yes. But also it's the kind of thing that we want to do when we feel the need to pray.
Yes.
We want to be, and you might have that thought, it's like when I get home I'm going to, or when I'm in a particular place alone in a quiet space, then, your experience can shift.
Which, of course, is what Jesus tells us in Matthew's Gospel we must do when we pray, is go to a room by yourself. I was thinking when I read this again that, we often think of religious teachers, and many people think Jesus was all about trying to get us into heaven. I think it's more like Jesus was trying to get heaven into us.
Oh, that's beautiful, isn't it? Yeah.
And I think that this is a poem for me that's circling that idea, that heaven is something, a treasure that's deep, which we have to protect in us.
I love that. I can see that. I can feel that.
And of course, the other poem that has paradise in it that's very famous is Paradise Lost. And this is paradise protected, concealed, cherished.
Embedded. Inside.
Yeah.
Carried. Yeah, it's lovely. Really lovely. And keep staring at it till you sleep. That there's somehow a impact of it. It's not just imaginative, that there is something, there's a duality in the nature of having it, that it gives you something. And it is something in that it can help you to go to sleep.
Yeah, and of course we need that at the moment, because so many people can't get to sleep because they're watching their phone again, devices and the stresses and the awful news we're watching day in, day out. There's a lot to stop our sleep, but this is...
It'll keep the mind ticking in a way that can be the paradise stealer, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I love what you've said, the line that stands out for you. The one for me is the fresh hope of morning. I love that image. I'm a very morning person.
Okay.
If I'm going to do anything, I'm going to do it better in the morning.
That's Mondays for me.
Okay.
But I hear that, the idea that every day, every morning when we wake, there is an opportunity for it to be different or to be better.
Yes.
Nice.
When we say morning prayer in the cathedral, each day the opening prayer talks about the gift of this new day. And it always resonates with me that.
And the need for hope as well. That's the sustaining line between how we might traditionally think about paradise and what Roger's offering us, is that there is this potential that it's still a container for hope.
Yes. Now you're someone who knows Roger Robinson.
Yep.
How do you...
I've known Roger for a long time. I was trying to remember when we first actually met, and I think that in the... Oh, do I have to say the decade? In the 1900s, as the kids call it, the 1990s, there was a poetry night. I forget what it's called. It used to take place in Brixton. And there was Vanessa Waters, I want to say, and Khadija, can't remember her surname, but the three of them with Roger had this poetry night. And in those days, I was really interested in the written poetry on text. But that was an isolated kind of thing that I did on my own. Spoken word enabled me to share that experience and to hear the rhythm and the sound and the musicality in the words. So I was on the poetry scene a lot and going to events. And I met Roger at one of those events. I can't remember, exactly what was happening around that time. And we meet each other at different events, and we were just always really supportive of each other over the decades. A bit like Bernardine Evaristo. I feel like he's had a really similar trajectory. He's always been around. He has dug deep, has been both an educator as well as a poet and a practicing writer, but always been really encouraging young talent to come through. I think with Malika Booker, they created Malika's Kitchen, that was a real kind of incubator for lots of poets who are both writing books and on the poetry scene still today. He's always been somebody that I've found has a really calming presence and a real love and understanding of poetry, both in its traditions, but how to break those traditions and to break forth, not just for the sake of breaking it, but in order to make room for the Black British experience in the UK and abroad, and how that has been an opportunity that he's used to refresh the canon, to kind of challenge it, and to create a space for voices that have often been hidden within traditional canons. So I've got a lot of respect and time for Roger. And I think might have been the launch of the Portable Paradise, the book, before the T.S. Eliot Prize, I was at the launch, and really loved to see the journey that he's taken, and being in his rightful place, I think, of being really influential in how we see words and experiences through the container of poetry.
And he was born in London. He was born in Hackney. His parents are from Trinidad. And then he goes to Trinidad at the age of 4, but then comes back here at the age of 19, and now lives in both places? Or?
I think so, yes. And you've just reminded me that when I first met Roger, he still had quite an accent. So maybe he was in his mid-20s then or something. But yeah, that's a journey that's rich in its tapestry of memories and connectivity between England and its other spaces where the diasporic community kind of exists, and how that's influenced, I think, his desire to tell the true stories, I think, of the Black British and the Black British migrant community, both in terms of voice but in terms of experiences.
And this poem is the poem that names the volume, which is his 4th volume of poems. And it's an extraordinary collection. That the poem in it, for instance, about the Grenfell Tower, and there's this great mixture of sort of pop culture and history and mythology and nature and socio-political commentary, but deep in it, a very strong sense of articulating human suffering. And I remember reading something he said about his own writing of poetry, when he said, I want these poems to help people practice empathy.
And that 100% is my attraction to poetry, but also in particular to Shakespeare. You know, this real idea that Shakespeare has the ability to inspire both hope and empathy. And given where we are in the world right now, where there's a genuine sense that the divisions that we've been experiencing have eroded our ability to be instantly, normally empathetic. So it feels like both in terms of what Roger's trying to achieve and in terms of why Shakespeare is so relevant to me today is that.
I think it was Hannah Arendt who said, when human beings start to lose that art of empathy, that's when the barbarous end of civilization begins to take place.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Let's hope we can pull it back a little.
Yeah, exactly. I was just thinking again about this word paradise. It's a word that religious people use a lot. It comes originally apparently from an Iranian language meaning enclosed garden.
How fascinating.
So obviously in the Judeo-Christian tradition, there is the Garden of Eden, which is a paradise, but actually the root of the word, it has this sense of an enclosed garden.
How interesting to have that as something that you can put in your pocket or
Exactly.
feel the ridges of. That feels much more accessible to everybody.
Yeah.
I love that as an idea. Beautiful.
And then I discovered that at one point Roger Robinson talks a bit about this poem. And he says that it originated in his experience of returning to England from Trinidad when he was 19. And there was a song apparently in the culture at the time by an Australian band which had a chorus in it, which said, everywhere you go, always take the weather with you.
I remember that track, yes.
And he used to sing this as he made his way in England to a pretty awful job, which was in industrial laundry.
Wow.
And it was really hard work. And he said to keep his spirits up, he kept looking at pictures of Trinidad.
Wow.
And his grandmother noticed that he was often down doing this work and said, don't let them get to you.
Wow.
And so he said this poem gave a sort of sensory feel to those pictures that he used to look at, with the smell and the texture and the quality of light and so on. And he said, it's a rallying on with memories and a mission to make your life better.
Wow. I love that story so much. There's so much in there. There's so much that I hear in there in terms of, the ability to turn a day that can be challenging by evocation, like what you evoke, and how he's trying to share that with us in a poem by evoking what he saw, or what might have actually really been in his pocket, maybe a small photo of Trinidad or a photo of his grandmother or something. I think it also reminds me of just the thing I love about words and language and rhythm and that ability for it to convey something that we feel and that we can share. And I just think there is something about words and language, which is why we're all scared at the moment, because words are being used around us in a way that maybe we don't always feel the same about.
They're being abused, aren't they?
Yeah, I really love that. I really love that.
Yes, Auden said poetry is a clear expression of mixed feeling.
Said it better than I.
And there is that in here. There is some mixture, but a very strong sense of, you get the sense from this poem that he knows what his paradise is.
Yes, it's not ambiguous.
No. And he's holding on to it and concealing it when necessary, but it isn't going anywhere. It's not leaving him.
I love that. And it has the ability to, in a really porous way, as his grandma was asking, you can have this scent on your handkerchief, the anthem under your breath. There's something in which it can also transmute into all of these different things so that you are never far away from it.
Yeah. I noticed also at the beginning of the poem, there's a lot of I. So if I'm speaking paradise and I'm speaking of my grandmother. And then after that line, that she speaks, that way they can't steal it, she'd say. That I starts to become you, puts you under pressure, your pocket. If your stresses, get yourself. And it's almost as if the poem is become a little bit closer. The words are being addressed to him, and he's hearing it as you. He's being addressed here. It's that important. I don't know.
I can see that. I can hear
just
that.
Something that I noticed in the words that were being used.
And is it a way to bring that? It's bringing the grandmother closer, as her words.
Yeah. He's hearing her,
And encouraging us to hear her too. So in a way, that baton at the beginning, which is she's passing this over, he passes to us.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you to end this wonderful time together by you reading it again. But before I do that, I'm going to ask a question that I'm going to ask everybody I'm going to talk to in this little series. Is why does the world need more poetry in it at the moment, do you think?
Well, you only have to imagine a world without poetry. And as you rightly talked about at the beginning, novels, prose can contain some of these ideas, but they are less portable. They are less memorable. There are lots of people still today who will hear a poem and remember it and recite it. So there's something about its ability to give us a elevator ride to, as I said at the beginning, the divine, to something that helps us to see outside of ourselves and beyond ourselves. And there are not many things that can do that. There are some things that have that impact over time, watching a great film or hearing a comedian and understanding their style. But poetry has an instant ability. For me, it's like the elevator ride that we sometimes need, that's quick, that's contained, that can be a jewel that is carried or encased in something else precious. We need poetry because of what it can do, and we need poetry because a world without it is colourless and takes longer to get to.
Thank you. That's lovely. I think it was Johnson who said that poetry helps us enjoy life or endure it. To enjoy and to endure.
Yeah, there's short distance between those two.
Yes,
things,
exactly.
It's good that poetry can fill the gap.
Can fill that gap. So, can you end by reading again Roger Robinson's poem, A Portable Paradise?
And if I speak of paradise, then I'm speaking of my grandmother, who told me to carry it always on my person, concealed, so no one else would know but me. That way, they can't steal it, she'd say. And if life puts you under pressure, trace its ridges in your pocket, smell its piney scent on your handkerchief, hum its anthem under your breath. And if your stresses are sustained and daily, get yourself to an empty room, be it hotel, hostel or hovel. Find a lamp and empty your paradise onto a desk, your white sands, green hills and fresh fish. Shine the lamp on it like the fresh hope of morning and keep staring at it till you sleep.
Thank you, Stella, so much for joining me today and for bringing this to us all. And let's keep reading poetry.